But in studio, we are having our second interview that is set to begin right now. We are shifting gears from the politics to the matters environmental conservation, having this conversation at a time when world leaders are gathering at Glasgow, Scotland for the COP26 international talks that are being spearheaded by the United Nations. The Conference of the Parties is a pivotal forum that is going to bring together world leaders to chart a way forward on how to address the climate change issues. And we just want to understand how significant this is for us and where Kenya fits in this whole global conversation about climate change. And in studio to help me have that important conversation, I have somebody who is very passionate about matters environment, and of course he's an environmental lawyer who has done a lot when it comes to, just encouraging young people and the entire population on how they can be able to understand climate change, understand the environment. And I'm talking about Kiprop Marimoi. He's with me in studio. Thank you so much, Kiprop, for creating time for us. And I just want us to start from what is happening currently as an environmentalist and as an environment lawyer. What is happening in Scotland right now is very crucial. I want you to tell us why this is important, why all focus should be shifted to this particular forum that is bringing together world leaders. Why is it important?
Thank you, Serfine, for having me today to discuss this issue, a very critical issue that must be discussed at this age and time. Like you've rightly put it, what is happening in Scotland, in Glasgow, is a meeting, a conference of parties to the United Nations on issues dealing with climate change. And just for your viewers, maybe just to understand, because climate change is a more scientific, if you look at it in critical sense. Climate change is not understood by many. And maybe just to give an illustration or just a synopsis of what it entails on matters of climate change. First, I may ask you, for example, to define for me what is weather and what is climate. And most people might not really understand the difference between the two, okay? Now, if you look at the proper definition, for example, of weather is the everyday conditions, okay? Let's say the issue of humidity, wind, for example, temperature. Okay,
it's hot,
precipitation, it is cold. That is for every day and maybe within a week. Now, if you look at climate on the other hand, it is the state of that weather for a long period of time, let's say for years, let's say for example. Now, when you talk about climate change, it is a change that happens within a prolonged period of time that has been statistically proven, okay? Now, that is what climate change is. And our scientists have told us, have informed us that indeed we are experiencing climate change. And that is why this conference of parties have come into place to help us understand, mitigate, or adapt to these effects of climate change. That is what is happening now in Glasgow.
All right.
Yes.
It's not a new topic. Climate change, it has been a progressive conversation, and this COP26 is not the first. The very first time we had such a forum was in 1995 in Berlin, when such delegates came together to talk about issues climate. Why are we having a feeling of, there's a sluggish adoption of agreements that touch on, environmental conservation? Is it an issue of funding or lack of goodwill, or it's just human nature? What could be the biggest problem? Because we are not achieving our target as fast as we would have hoped to as a globe.
Well, that is true, and that will tell you, if you Conference of Parties 26, that tells you there have been 25 meetings since the inception of these processes. Okay. Now, the complex nature of climate change and what targets or what ambitions these nations needs to put in is what actually makes these countries, drag their legs. Let's say, for example, to meet whatever agreement that they agree, because that means countries needs to cut on emissions. countries, for example, who depend on fossil fuel for fueling the economic growth, these nations will be very reluctant to cut these emissions, okay? Because they depend on coal source of power to develop their nations. That is the reason why it has been taking very long time for this nation to come up with an agreement on this issue. That is exactly the reason why it is taking a longer period of time. And Glasgow, for example, is trying to push these states, the polluter states, the developed nations, to make more firm commitments in terms of cutting emissions, or depending, weaning them off the coal, for example, or this dirty fuel, as we call it, that is causing emission of CO2 to the atmosphere.
All right. When you talk about these polluting countries, you remind me of there's what they call the Paris Agreement that, these countries came up with. This was in 2015, that actually nullified the agreement that was there before, the Kyoto Protocol, which initially had actually banned 37 industrialized states from, obligated them to reduce their emissions. But the US and China were not part of the Kyoto, protocol. It was after several meetings were held, and until 2015, that during the COP21, the Paris Agreement was formulated, and US and China this particular time were on board. There seems to be a challenge when it comes to managing and controlling these developed countries. Yet at the same time, the impact on the climate, the impact on the environment that comes from these developed countries affect more the developing nations compared to them, because we are the ones who are relying on agriculture. We are the ones who need a clean environment. I mean, how do we go about this conversation so that at the end of the day, it's not about who has more power, who has more resources. It's all about what is good for us as an entire globe, what is good for our environment. It's not about who has what. How do we go about this conversation?
Like you correctly put it, and this is a report that has been in the assessment report of IPCC that puts Africa and other developing countries at the risk of catastrophe, climatic catastrophe.
They're affected more.
Now, Africa contributes less than 4% of these emissions. 80% emanate from these developed nations. And like you've said correctly, they are not willing. They are not willing as developed nations to cut their emissions. And I'm very happy today. We are making some, in Glasgow, we are making some inroads in terms of making sure that these countries commit to cutting their emissions. Today, for example, we've learned that they have committed to cut forest destruction in the next 10 years, in the next decade. Mostly Brazil, which is hosting the Amazon rainforest, the Congo, for example. So these are the kind of things that we want to see, But China, the president of China was not present in Glasgow. Likewise to President Putin, Russia, which is the main source of natural gas, one of the main contributors of CO2 in the atmosphere.
Is there a bigger message we should be reading from this absence?
You see, when you are being categorized as one of the major polluters, for example, and you fail to show up in such kind of a meeting, that tells you you are not committed. India, for example, which is the third largest emitters of CO2, has pushed the net zero carbon from 2050 that most of these countries have committed to 2070. China has remained at 2060. So if you don't have more a unified timeline, let's say, for example, because we don't have this time to face the challenges that the negative impacts of climate change. So time needs to be a very critical aspect. So if you see, it has to be accelerated.
Faster.
Yes. So if you see other countries, major polluters, saying we are not going to go by the 2050 that most of these developed countries have agreed. We are going to 2060, let's say, for China, 2070 for India. That tells you there's lack of, we have to come together. Okay, so we were expecting that all these countries, they agree by 2050 they should have met or agreed to have a net zero carbon. So that is where the problem is. So it's lack of commitment, number one. And like you've said, the African nations, okay, the developing, especially Africa, let's talk about Africa. We are the people who are going to face very harsh climatic conditions because of this climate change issue, okay? West Africa, for example, if you look at West Africa, 40% of the population live along the coastal line. We are going to see the rise of sea level, okay? So where are these people going to go? So we are going to have displaced population in those kind of areas. Now, so there's a lot of issues that needs to be looked at as Africa, okay? Push the developed nations for more commitment from them, okay? And the issue, of course, of trying to get finance, okay, for mitigation and adaptation for developing countries, okay? And the president of Malawi yesterday, when he was interviewed in Glasgow, he stated that, you know, it is not a climate aid. We are not requesting for aid. What we are saying, pay for polluting. Otherwise, we could have been okay as Africa if things were not the way they are in the atmosphere. If the amount of tons of, you know, billions of tons of whatever of CO2 in the atmosphere was not as it is now, then Africa could have, you know, the earth could have naturally cooled itself. So we are talking about so many other things.
All
and
right.
Climate issue.
As a lawyer, is there a legal approach to this? Because are we then saying that developing countries are helpless when it comes to sitting at the negotiating table and formulating agreements that will benefit, you know, both sides of the divide? Are we helpless? Can't we do something to obligate the developed countries to actually agree to some of these treaties and actually implement them in their own countries?
We cannot say that we are helpless as such. I mean, there is a lot of things that we can do as a country because we have agreed to what we call the national determined obligations for countries. Let's say, for example, Kenya. Now, because the initial reasons why these parties agreed to join by signing to this protocol, let's say, for example, or the Paris Agreement, or being in the UNFCCC framework for climate change convention, is that you want to be bound by it. It is a legally binding document, okay, by the developed nations. Now, if you say we are going to finance, for example, 100 billion US dollars annually to developed nations, then that ought to come from you, okay? That it is an obligation that you have to discharge, okay? There is no way the legal, as much as it is a legal binding commitment, there is no way of enforcing it, okay? So we'll just wait for them.
It's out of goodwill.
It's out of goodwill.
Yeah, and that's where the problem.
And you've seen, actually, the commitment, the pledge that was made in Copenhagen 12 years ago has not been fulfilled to date. Actually, it has been pushed to 2023. Now, that tells you, number one, lack of commitment. Number two is the developing countries also need to look for other options to mitigate and adapt to climate change, okay? And you've seen as a country, as Kenya, for example, there's a lot of things that we've done as a country. Number one is to increase our forest cover, okay? Initially, we had gone to 2%. Right now, we are going to 7%, okay? Those are the immediate carbon sinks as a country.
All right.
Yes.
At this particular forum, countries will be expected to give what I would call a scorecard, because now we are rating ourselves against the Paris Agreement and how far we've gone, the progress we've made, among other issues, of course, that are going to be discussed at this forum. But one key issue is going to be looking at how far you've gone when it comes to, you know, implementing the agreements that, you know, the nations came up with in 2015. How do you think Kenya fared? How do you think our report is going to look like?
If you look at where we were and where we are heading. Remember, this is a country that is sitting at the heart of, you know, the equator, Okay, this is where we receive the highest amount of solar energy. Okay, this is where we will feel the negative impacts of climate change. The most we saw it, even in our neighboring country in Tanzania, where tropical cyclone Jobo was reaching the shores, and fortunately that it fizzled out along the way. Now, as Kenya, we can say we are trying our best. Okay. Because if you look at our forest cover, like I've stated, it has improved from 2% to nearly 7%. We are going.
You're targeting 10%.
Yes, constitutionally we have to hit the 10% cover. Okay, internationally we need to go to 12%. Okay, that is the UN recommended level. Now, then the issue of renewable source of energy. Okay, we have the hydro. Okay, Kenya is moving very fast on geothermal. Okay, so the president today, I think yesterday he spoke, and he said in the next by 2030 they should have reached what we call the carbon net zero carbon. Okay, there's a lot of raft of issues that needs to be done. Okay, so in the energy sector, I think we are moving the right direction. We don't have coal power plants, for example, and that tells you that we are heading towards the right direction.
All right. If you look at our own, challenges that we struggle with as a country when it comes to addressing the issue of climate change, what are those challenges that Kenyans are relating to? What are the issues that we need to prioritize if we are to bring this agenda home? What are we dealing with as a country that is causing us an environmental crisis? Let me use that phrase.
There are quite a number of issues that relate to climate change in Kenya in particular, and one of them is lack of water. Okay, there is shortage of water if the drought is prolonged. Okay, and that, I mean, it immediately tells you something about sanitation. Okay, diseases will emerge resulting from the issue of unavailability of water. Then there is the food security. Okay, we are dependent on rain-fed agriculture. Without the rain, Kenyans will not survive. Okay, that's a fact. We need to say it as it is. So if the rain is not there, that means you and I cannot eat. The food prices will go up. Then you know what follows after that. There is the issue of human health. Now, there is the intensity of diseases will surge. Okay, there's epidemics will come. Okay, because of this issue of climate change. So this is something that also needs, the human health is at a very critical stage. Then there is, of course, the extreme weather patterns. Okay, farmers will not be able to know what is going on. Tropical cyclone, like the one that we saw in Tanzania, for example, will set in. Mau, or the Mara River, where there is the seventh wonder of this world, will disappear because there's no.
Which is an unfortunate.
It is an unfortunate issue.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Again, like I've said, the sea level rise, which will negatively impact the mangrove forest. Coral reef plays a very critical role. It's an ecosystem that hosts quite a number of species in the coastal areas. Okay, so, and also there's that issue of biodiversity loss. Okay, if, let's say, flamingo in Lake Nakuru, okay, the level of that lake now is very high. Baringo, we saw schools being closed because
was submerged.
Yes, yes. Yeah. That tells you the effects of climate change we are facing as Kenya. We are seeing. It's not about theories now. It is what we can see as a country.
It's already happening.
It is happening.
Yeah, in Elementaita, Lake Nakuru, Bogoria, and Logipi. I mean, have we hit Mother Nature and it's now hitting us back, or what is happening? Is it a natural phenomenon what you're witnessing, or it's as a result of human activity, or both? Where do you see this from?
climate change has both dimensions.
Yeah.
There's the one that is naturally occurring, then there's one that me and you, and these are the people,
yeah,
yes, yeah. We are inducing. It's called anthropogenic source of climate change. Okay, pumping CO2 into the atmosphere. That is me and you causing. Okay, and mostly because the scientists have told us that the main reason why there's this change of erratic weather is because we induce that humans. We induce this climate change to come. Because if you compare the period of pre-industrial level, okay, the Earth was cooling itself naturally. But now, since we have introduced all these billions of CO2 into the atmosphere, the world is now changing. If you can, I mean, last week there was a report in major outlets. There's a town in Canada, okay, that hit 50 degrees, 49.6 degrees Celsius, a record that has never been seen before.
49 degrees, that's too high.
49.6.
Yeah, okay. 49.6.
49.6. Now, that tells you why. Okay, why now? Why is it happening now? If it was happening then we can say it was a natural phenomenon. But it is because, and scientists have put it in that manner, that it is us, the human greed to development, without taking into consideration the sustainable way of developing our nations. Okay, so we can say it is us who are inducing this thing.
Could we have prevented this industrialization, this new wave of moving towards this direction? Could we have stopped it? Did we have a choice? If you look at when it started and now we are experiencing its impact, did we have a choice, or could we have done it better? What do you think?
Now, I think it is not too late. Okay, and that is why these meetings are happening. It is not too late that there's nothing we can do. Okay, we had something to do then. Okay, but we failed to do. Maybe because we didn't have enough knowledge to understand what climate change really entails. Okay, maybe we didn't know if it was CO2, if it was methane, let's say, for example, hydrocarbons. Okay, so if we never had that knowledge, but now we have the opportunity to know because of the scientists who have informed us so, then we have an opportunity. Okay, and that is a message that is being sent in Glasgow, that it is not too late. This is a time of action. Okay, we need to act now. It will reach a time where maybe we have the opportunity to sit with you, where we are saying, I wish we did. Okay, but now we still have an opportunity to change things.
You lose nothing by starting now.
That is true.
It depends on how you look at it.
That is true.
But now, how do we bring this information, this message? For example, the agreement that is going to culminate the Glasgow meeting. I believe the people who have the biggest responsibility of implementing and even bringing change to how we look at the environment are the local people,
yes.
Those who are in the villages, those who are in the communities, those who are in these industries. How do we bring that information from the boardroom to these people? Because it doesn't really help if these meetings are held in those boardrooms and agreements are signed, and there's a lack of information and a lack of knowledge and a lack of awareness about environmental conservation at the grassroots level.
That is true. Yeah. I totally agree with you, because I did mention from the onset that one of the things that we fail, as countries, is disseminating that cascading those information from the office, the boardrooms,
yes,
all the way to the local level. Climate change is a phenomenon that most people do not understand. Okay, even if you do a statistics of the knowledge on climate change, it is actually appalling, to say the least. How we are going to educate people on climate change is what it is more of a government policy. Okay. For example, I think it is time that we include climate change on our curriculum. Okay. Okay. We need to teach, especially the younger generation, why we need to protect the environment, why climate change is so serious that all of us needs to do something. Okay. We need to do awareness on why it is important for every person to plant a tree. Why it is important, for example, to, let's say, paint our buildings white so that it can reflect rather than absorb.
These are the basic things.
Yes. Yeah. Basic environmental conservation is basic. It is more of an individual. We can do it as an individual, and then we don't need to wait for the government actually to do it. Planting a tree, for example, you don't need the government to tell you to plant a tree. It doesn't need to be legislated for you to plant a tree. Something like painting all buildings white, for example, it is more of a government or a county policy. Using solar panels, okay, instead of roofs. I mean, our roof should be not mabati. It should be more of solar panels so that it can either cool instead of using our energy from these other sources. Okay, so we have an opportunity as Kenya, Africa, because we have the enough sources of solar energy, so that we can move from the fossil fuel to more renewable energy. And this is something that the Kenya government has to do a lot of work, giving incentives, let's say, for example, reviewing taxes on issues of, other sources of, let's say, solar, for example. It is very expensive.
So having tax reliefs and tax breaks on projects and programs that are environmentally friendly. Because I was about to take you that the issue of funding has always been the excuse that we may not be able to do all that because we are crippled when it comes to funds. Countries would complain that, the budgetary allocation on environmental conservation programs is quite limited and nothing much can be achieved. So you're giving very useful insights on what can be explored in terms of just bringing this cost down and helping us meet what we want to meet in terms of target. Let's talk about the law, because this is where you thrive. What is the place of the law, and how have we treated it when it comes to environmental conservation in this country? I was looking at a list of laws that touch on environmental issues, when I was preparing for this program, and I was actually saying, I mean, do you mean we have all these laws that touch on environmental issues, but how effective have they been to help us really meet this target?
It is true that we have quite a number of laws on touching on environment. Actually, we, according to a paper by Professor Mbote, there were 77 legislation touching on environment because it is sectoral. If you look at Water Act, for example, Environmental Management and Coordination Act, Kenya Forest Act, so there's quite a number of laws touching on environment. And some of us, me included, we've been trying to merge these laws. Now, remember, you're in court. Let's say you are the judge or the magistrate, for that matter, and you are handling issues of the emerging issues about, let's say, contamination of water. Okay, it is environmental if you look at it, but the kind of punishment that you give because of that particular statute is way too low or way too high than another legislation touching on the same thing. Okay, so you find yourself having duplicated. It is duplication. Okay, so and environment has no borders. It doesn't touch pollution of contamination of water in Kenya. Let's say where I come from, Cherangani Hills. If we contaminate water in Cherangani Hills, that water goes to Lake Victoria to Uganda, Uganda to all the way to Egypt. Now, some of us, we are advocating that we collapse all these laws. We have one law, one punishment for contamination of water across East Africa, and this is something that we can start from East Africa, for example. So if you pollute the atmosphere, the punishment is uniform in Uganda, in Kenya, in Rwanda, name them, all these other countries. Likewise to contamination of water. So that we know the punishment is, if you are going to serve 20 years for polluting the environment, it has to be the same across. Look at even how we ban this use of plastic bags. Uganda is still on. Rwanda, at least we followed. Rwanda is taking a very good step towards conservation and the protection of the environment. Kenya did follow Rwanda, but most of these plastic bags are brought from Uganda to Kenya.
So it is still a tricky balance, because the neighbor is still not moving in the same direction with us. But even as it took us quite a while to get to that point, it was actually really commendable that as a country we managed to ban plastic bags, a step in the right direction. Now I wish you could apply it in other areas as well. But do you think there is enough information and knowledge about these laws? Do people even know about their existence? Environment has not been given priority when it comes to legal issues.
Yes, that is true. And again, boils down to the issue of legal awareness in terms of environmental issues or the general education. And when you're educating, let's say we are setting up that curriculum, for example, for environment for our children in school, then the issue of what does the law say will always be captured. If you are found littering, this is the punishment. And I normally have a very rough time when I'm using our Kenyan roads, because you follow someone, all of a sudden something lands on the road.
It's normal. It's normal. I mean,
it's something that needs to be condemned, actually, if, as a country, and that is why we are saying there's more need to do education awareness in terms of environmental conservation. That's what we are lacking. But at least we are making some positive steps towards, environmental awareness. You can see Kenyans now more planting trees. For example, people personally, on their personal level, doing quite a number of things that are more eco-friendly than before. So there's a lot that needs to be done as a nation and as individuals as such. Yes.
How do we change the narrative from the punitive approach of taking action, legal action against somebody who has violated an environmental provision to a more self-generated goodwill to conserve the environment? How do we achieve that? Because the punitive doesn't really seem to be working, if you may ask me. We have like 70, laws that touch on environmental issues, but so far we still have a long way to go when it comes to environmental conservation. How do we change the narrative from punitive to something more self-inspired?
I think the punitive angle of it always serves, some purpose.
Yeah, okay? It helps.
It helps in some way. So we'll not say we are going to do away with the punitive aspect of it. Okay. Now, these other one will come. The self-driven, awareness in terms of conserving the environment is more of attributes of educating these people as to what is climate change. Why is it important that we don't pollute our environment? Why is it that we minimize the plastics? Let's say, for example, how long does it stay in our soil? Okay. Now, if these people get that knowledge, is when now someone will make individual decision to say, from today henceforth, I'm not going to litter. Okay. From today, I'm not going to ban this plastic waste that we normally do as a way of putting it away. Okay. So it is
to
more
us,
of like,
we are conserving the environment by banning it, not knowing that we're actually creating another.
You are now taking the knee up.
Yeah,
okay?
True.
So it's a way. It's an all-rounded thing that needs to do. We need to do a lot of awareness to our locals, and I'm very happy that the Kenyan Constitution, the current one now, initially. And this is Wangari Maathai actually suffered a lot when it comes to issues of protection of the environment, because the former constitution never recognized something called the right to clean and healthy environment. Okay, actually going to court to the one for this park, Uhuru, the one that she fought for, Karura and Karura Forest and the rest. Now, for her to go to court, someone had to, prove that there is a personal injury, okay, that you have incurred before you bring such a case to court. It is an environmental issue. It is not a personal issue, okay? But you're saying for the sake of a future generation,
there has to be,
yes, there must be some connection. That was the sad part of the former law. Now, the current constitution under Article 42 makes it very clear every single person has the right to clean and healthy environment, okay? And it goes further to say, under Article 69 and 70, that you need not to prove that you've suffered any harm for you to move to court for redress, okay? So any other person can, if today you see someone who is want to conduct something that is will harm the environment, you have that standing to go to court, okay? And say, hey, look, this particular project is harmful to the environment. It needs not to be, you know, it has been the tradition that someone needs to prove that you have suffered harm, but the current constitution actually saves the environment in a very big way. And that gives environmentalists and lawyers like myself now the platform to protect our environment, to minimize climate change, to, you know, on this mitigate, name them, all these other issues. So in the legal front, I think we have made big steps. Yeah, so
at least some progress there has been made in terms of making the law, you know,
more green.
More, and more alive to the current circumstances that we are going through. Let me take you to something happening in Migori, maybe just your legal, you know, opinion on this. The gold mines in that region, residents term them as death traps. Environmentalists have raised concern about the destruction on farms, residential areas, and even threats posed to livestock with regards to mining activities going on in that region. Leaders have come out to speak against this. Are they helpless? What can they do? Because it is not something that started yesterday. Many people have lost their lives, you know, as a result of activities that are going on in these gold mines. Even in Kakamega the other day, there was a gold mine that caved in and claimed lives. In such circumstances, how are residents empowered to take action against, you know, such an occurrence?
Yep, and that is true, and it's happening quite a number of areas, not even Migori and Kakamega alone. I think where the blame goes more is now the authorities that are responsible for issuing EIAs, for example, okay, environmental impact assessment, okay, leave alone what the locals can do, because, like I've said, the constitution is very clear. If someone is doing something, even if the government is doing something that is going to likely cause harm to the environment, you can move to court, okay? So the law is very clear. You have that standing to go to court. Now, my problem is the NEMA, for example, National Environment Management Authority, issuing an EIA license to a mining company mining gold in Migori, defacing you know, these large holes that have become even more dangerous to life-threatening to the locals. Now, what responsibility, okay, if you are going to issue, because you cannot just act in vacuum, okay? Someone, the miner, let's say, someone who is mining that gold in Migori must have received the go-ahead from the Ministry of...
To do it.
Yes, to do it. There must be been a license from the Ministry of Mining, okay? There must be an EIA license issued by NEMA. So even doing so, there must have been other measures that you, after digging up that mineral, you have to return the land as it were, okay, to its state, okay? Because what I've seen is people digging up these minerals, then go to the next field, okay? So leaving these people with these kind of life-threatening scenarios that you've just painted, people lose their lives, even their livestock, okay? So it is an issue of the regulatory framework, the authorities, keeping a very close eye to these people who have the licenses, okay, to make sure that whatever they do must include also, after they finish, return the area the way it was, the landscape. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
I like how that's more proactive.
Yes.
As opposed to being reactive. At least if they stop it at the point of starting this particular, gold mining activities, then we can actually avert such threats. I want to take you back to Scotland. At the climax of this particular forum, as an environmentalist, as somebody who has a very strong passion in environmental conservation, what are the key issues that you hope that those who are attending this conference are going to agree on? If you look at our globe, and even if you like, you can bring it down to Kenya, what we are currently facing. What is it that you want to see as part of the agreement that is going to be formulated at the end of this forum? I think the most critical thing is the commitment to lower the emissions or the global temperature to 1.5 target. Okay, that is the most important thing. Number two is commitment by the large polluters, the developed world, to honor their pledges. Okay, let's say the one for climate funding. Okay, the 100 billion annually. They should not be deferring every now and then to another 2 or 3 years. We are now going to 2023, and it was something that was promised in 2012. Okay, so you can imagine that time that it is taking, yet they are still polluting. Okay, and the impact that has been actually the resources that finance that we are talking about would have assisted the developing countries to mitigate and adapt to climate change. So we are defining problems. Okay, so don't be surprised. Most of us are hopeful that Glasgow will break that circle of every now and then we'll have to go to another conference or party to discuss issues of 10, 15 years ago. Okay, so we are hoping that Glasgow will have a far-reaching commitments from these other countries, okay, so that we have a lasting solutions. Right. Yes. At least let's talk about new problems, not the same old problems from COP1 to now COP26. Yes. Thank you so much, Kiprop Marimoi, an environmental lawyer, for shedding light on what is currently going on in the global efforts to mitigate the impact of climate change, and also talking to us about the significance of the COP26 international talks currently happening at Glasgow, Scotland, and the way forward, what he hopes as an environmentalist that global leaders are going to come up with as part of the agreements to chart forward the agenda for addressing the issue of climate change in the entire globe. Of course, that is all we had for you on News Check this particular morning, but you are paving way for the Swahili version of the program. We will be letting Ben Chumba take you through that. We're going to be having Kurunzi Mashinani and Tamrini in just a bit. My name is Achieng Ouma, and our sign language interpreter has been Lensa Odingo. Thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your viewing.